And welcome back to Taxation is Theft, the show that talks about all the ways the government is ripping you off and what you can do to stop them. Broadcasting live from an underground bunker somewhere deep within the jungles of Mexico, I'm Dan, Taxationist Theft Berman, former candidate for president of the United States, currently in the race for governor of Texas. We're going to bring some freedom to Texas because Texas, the great state of Texas, even though we're not big fans of the great state, Texas is not as free as most people think it would be. For example, when we went to go hold our insulin rally, where I smuggled insulin from Mexico to sell it 88% off the American price in front of the Capitol, the Boogaloo boys who came with me with their AK-47s, well, we were turned away because we had a flag with us. In fact, this flag that you see back here, we weren't allowed to take this flag on the Capitol grounds. The guns were okay. So I guess we have a little bit of freedom in Texas, but we weren't allowed to bring the flag. Can you imagine that? Texas has some flag envy issues. Apparently, Texas is the only state that's allowed to flag. Allowed, as in, if they didn't, the feds would come in and probably do something about it. Texas is the only state that's allowed to fly a Texas flag higher than an American flag. Did you know that? So imagine you live in California and you wanted to put a flag up in front of your house. You know, you've seen a flagpole with like 2 or 3 flags on it. If the top one was not the United States flag, let's say you had the California flag above the United States flag, the feds would probably send in a SWAT team. It might be NASA's SWAT team. Did you know NASA has a SWAT team? They have a SWAT team. I don't know. In case the aliens break out of the Area 51 or something. I don't know. Anyways, today's show is brought to you by Nugg of Knowledge. Get elevated over at nuggofknowledge.com. Premium smokable CBD and THC Delta 8 flower, vape cartridges, all kinds of cool stuff. So today, I got a couple issues to talk about, but this is a free-for-all show. So if you got something to talk about, there's a link in the description. Just click on that, and I'll see you pop up here in my little studio, and I'll add you in, and we can have a nice, fun conversation about taxes and the government and how they're screwing us over. But in the meantime, while you're working up the courage to join the show, where do we begin? The international minimum tax. International minimum tax. Now, when I first heard about this, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. There's who's going to impose this tax? Who's going to collect this tax, right? International tax? Is this a UN thing? Is this a one world government, NWO? What's going on here? Well, apparently all it is it's an agreement among nations to have a minimum income tax. So right now in the United States, you have all these big corporations and they're like, I don't want to pay 30%, 20%, whatever it is, corporate income tax. That sucks. Screw you guys. Taxation is theft. We're going to go to another country that doesn't tax us as much. Well, nobody likes that. So, how do you stop them? Well, if there weren't any other countries with a lower tax rate, there wouldn't be anywhere to go. So the plan is to make sure that there are no other countries with lower tax rates by imposing a minimum tax rate. So, for example, I think Ireland is one. Ireland has a lower tax rate. You've also got all the islands. Mauritius is one, where offshore stuff. Panama used to do it. Dominican Republic, Belize, all these places that let you set up corporations and you don't pay a penny worth of income tax on it. they're going to try to get all these countries, some of them are banana republics, they're going to try to get them all to impose a minimum corporate tax. So that if you tried to leave, if you were like, I don't like the IRS, okay, fine, go to another country, but you're still going to have to pay at least, some amount of tax. So now if the United States is a 30% tax and Belize is a 0% tax, well, save a lot of money by going to Belize. But if Belize was a 10% tax and the US was 30%, well, you're not going to save as much, but you're still going to save a lot. Still makes sense to move there. If you're making $1 billion, if you have to pay $1 million in the US, you're going to save 600 something thousand dollars by going to Belize, even if it's 10%. So this isn't really going to solve much unless they come up with a minimum tax that is the same or very close to the 30% that they want to charge here. And I know that's not the right number. I think it's like 28, or it was after Trump, it was like 23. Now they want to put it back up to 28. It's always bouncing all over the place, but that's the idea, right? So whatever it is, it's going to have to be close to what the United States income tax is. Well, see, the thing is, they don't tax you as a foreign corporation when you're in these other countries. Because if they did that, well, I don't want to say never, because they do have two different tiers. For example, in Belize, there is a 0% corporate income tax, but you have to register as what's called an international business company. And as that international business company, you're not allowed to do business with people in Belize. So basically, it's a tax shelter corporation, and you're not allowed to take money from Belize. So if you wanted to do business in Belize, you had to have a regular corporation, and that one actually does have a regular tax rate. So they do have two different tiers of this thing, but imposing higher tax rates, and then they're probably going to have some pressure to get rid of the tiered system and all this other stuff. You're going to do damage to these other countries with businesses that operate locally. So what's the point of all this? The United States isn't making enough in taxes. Now think about this too. California, I see Daniel join in the waiting room. I'll add you in a minute here. Check your internet connection, because it looks like it's coming in kind of slow. Make sure you're close to the Wi-Fi. Imagine this. The United States is made up of different states, and although there is a federal income tax, there's also a state income tax in a lot of the states. California is one of them. A lot of businesses are leaving California because of their tax rates. Even though these businesses do business all over the country, right? They're still going to do business in California, but they're not going to be based inside of California because of the main tax that they have to pay. And so California is losing tax revenue because all these businesses are leaving California. This is the exact same thing, except on a nationwide scale instead of a global scale. So when Apple says, hey, we're going to move to where is it? Ireland, I think. When Apple says we're going to move to Ireland, well, it's good for Ireland. It's bad for the United States, right? But that's an international company. When you have a national company, like, I don't know, Taco Bell or something, that's international, but whatever. You have a national company that only deals mostly nationally, and they move from California, let's say In-N-Out. They move their headquarters from California to Texas, so they don't have to pay the income tax. California is going to lose all that tax money, and they've already done this. And to make up for it, usually what they do is they jack up their taxes on everybody else who stayed, which is not fair to everybody who stayed. And this is why the cost of living is getting so bad there, because everyone's getting taxed twice as much because they're making up for half the people that left, which is completely stupid. Because, I mean, why do you need twice as much tax revenue when there's half as many people now? Doesn't make any sense. But this is California. It's all ass backwards. But they're losing revenue because businesses are leaving. Now, imagine if California did the same thing that the United States is saying right now. What this would look like is California telling Texas, hey, you know what? Our businesses are leaving California and they're going to Texas because you have lower taxes. and you treat businesses better, well, you're going to have to raise your taxes in Texas because we don't want our companies to leave California for Texas. So California would want to raise the taxes in Texas. How much sense does that make? How fair is that to the people of Texas who don't want to raise their tax rates? Think about that. Ooh, we're losing money. We want other people. People don't like us because we steal from them. And so they're going to other places that don't steal from them. But if you stole from people the same way we steal from people, they wouldn't leave our country, our state. They'd stay here and we can keep stealing from them. So you better start stealing from them. Imagine how stupid this would sound if it was anything else, right? Let's say people like to live in neighborhoods with low crime rates, with low murder rates. So the city of Chicago calls up the city of, I don't know, what's a nice friendly city with a low crime rate? I'm going to say, I don't know, everything that comes to mind, I'm guessing like it's not exactly a low crime rate. I'm going to say San Antonio. It's not zero, but it's lower than Chicago, right? So imagine people are leaving Chicago for San Antonio because they're like, well, San Antonio's safer. Chicago is dangerous. I don't want to get stuck in Chicago. I might get shot. So the city of Chicago said, oh, this is unacceptable. And instead of making their city safer, what they do is they tell San Antonio, hey, you guys better start raping and murdering the people who come there from other states because we don't want them to get the idea that there are safer places than our city. Isn't that insane? Isn't that ridiculous? Isn't that stupid? That's exactly what the United States is trying to do. And why doesn't California do it to Texas? Well, because there are safeguards, right? There's a United States Constitution that says we can't do that. It's not allowed. It's written in the Constitution. But anything outside the country. But how can we force other countries? Why would Ireland? Ireland's getting all this business from all these companies moving there. And if they raise their tax rate, all these companies would be like, we're not going to save that much money. Where are we going to go through the hassle of moving to Ireland? Setting up an office, doing this and that. Why are we going to waste our time with that? Ireland's going to lose money if they do that. So what incentive does Ireland have to raise their taxes so that businesses stay in the United States? Well, they have the incentive of the United States not going to war with them. Now, of course, we're not going to start dropping bombs on Ireland because that's a civilized nation, right? If it was Iran, they didn't want to raise their taxes. We'll just drop bombs on them. That's cool because that's in the Middle East. Those people are browner than the people in Ireland. So, can't drop bombs on them. What are you going to do? Economic sanctions. Oh, if you're not going to be a part of our program, we're not going to allow people to export there, or we're going to charge extra tariffs for things leaving the United States for Ireland. Well, that's illegal. Export taxes are illegal. Import taxes they're allowed to do, but export taxes are illegal for some reason. But they'll figure out a way. They always do. I mean, it could be a currency thing. They could impose currency sanctions. We're not going to trade our currency with yours. So now people there are trying to buy things with whatever the currency is in Ireland. They're trying to buy things from the United States, and the United States says, well, you can buy it, but we're not going to trade that money back to you for You got to buy dollars. I don't know. I don't know how that works. You're not going to get your money back, right? That gets into the idea of trade deficits and things like that. But they absolutely do have the power to strong arm them, which is totally wrong, totally immoral, totally criminal, but perfectly legal, to manipulate the currency to make things very bad for them until they impose a tax that's bad for them, but good for the United States. I want to mention this too, because a lot of people think like, oh yeah, trade sanctions between, two countries. Well, that's only fair because we're buying their steel and they're buying our rice and blah, 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 all this stuff. The country doesn't produce anything. The government does not produce steel. The government does not produce rice. And so if you impose a tariff on steel, what you're actually doing, you're not hurting the country itself as much as you're hurting the individuals in that country who are producing that good, because they're having a harder time to sell it now. You're making it more difficult for the people in your country because prices on those things are going up. It's criminal. And I hear this argument all the time. Well, yeah, but if it's a sales tax or a tariff or blah, 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 it's voluntary because you don't have to buy that product. That's not what voluntary means. I mean, you have a choice to do anything or not do anything in your life, right? That's what determines what is voluntary, what is not, what you decide to do. But if there are two people who want to do something together, such as trading, that is voluntary. They're both engaged voluntarily. But if a third party gets in the middle of that and says, hey, I know neither one of you guys want me here, but I want a piece of the action, that is not voluntary. So I'll use the gas tax because people say, oh, the gas tax is voluntary because you don't have to buy gas. I don't have to buy gas. I want to buy gas, and somebody wants to sell it to me. And neither one of us want the government there. Imagine this. Oh, this is a very, very disgusting, terrible example, but I'm going to say it anyways. Imagine this. You're having consensual sex with somebody. And somebody from the government comes and says, I'm going to join in, whether you like it or not. Oh, it's voluntary. You guys you're already voluntarily engaged in sex. I'm going to jump in the middle. That doesn't sound very exciting. Almost sounds kind of like rape, doesn't it? Or taking away your freedom. I had to throw sex in there. Why not? This is a free-for-all show, guys. So if you have any questions or you want to talk about something, there's a link in the comments. Just go click it and join in. Let's see. What else did I want to talk about? There's something else. Something else. I don't remember. Oh, when you talk about the voter ID, voter registration thing. So there's all kinds of bullshit going around with this. Georgia voted to have a voter ID law. And I guess some sports things were like, yeah, we don't support Georgia. We're going to leave Georgia for another state. And there was a sports ball game that was supposed to be played in Georgia. I don't know which one. I don't know what league. I don't follow any of that garbage. But they left for Colorado. The thing is, Colorado already has voter ID laws similar to what Georgia is passing. And there's a lot of misinformation going around on this. And so I want to bring up a few different issues on voting. So there's always been a fight on who gets to vote. And I think one of the reasons it's never been clear on who gets to vote, I mean, because everyone's like, oh, everyone should get to vote. Oh, but what about foreigners? No, not so. It's like, okay, we have very clear, all Americans should vote, foreigners should not vote. citizens should vote. What is a citizen? Does anybody know what a citizen is? Can anybody give me a perfect citation of what a citizen is? Usually people say, well, if you're born here, or, well, no, that's not what a citizen is. That's how you became a citizen. Or you immigrated and you got, you went through the immigration process and you became a citizen. That's how you became a citizen. That's not what a citizen is. So is it citizens that get to vote? Well, in the, what is it? The 14th Amendment, it says anybody is a citizen of a state and the country, right? It still doesn't say what a citizen is. It just says how you become a citizen. It's kind of weird how they say it, but when you move to another state, how do you become a citizen of that state? Now, if you look up the laws and rules and everything, you'll find things about residency, but residency is different from citizenship. For example, if you are Mexican and you come to the United States, you can get a residency visa, and you're now a resident of the United States, but you're not a citizen. So if you move from California to Texas, and you follow the residency rules, and you stay there for 30 days, and you have an address, and blah, 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 blah. Well, what about the homeless people? That's another story. You're a resident. Are you a citizen? Okay, now, voting. Is voting just for citizens? Or is it for residents? Because if you go to register to vote, what do they ask you? You have to be a resident. They don't ask if you're a citizen, usually. Sometimes they'll ask. I don't know if that validates or invalidates your thing. But back when women couldn't vote, was that the thing? And why couldn't women vote? Why couldn't black people vote? Oh, because they were slaves. They weren't citizens, they were slaves. What about women? Were they citizens? Were they citizens? I don't know. They couldn't vote. There was an interesting theory that somebody told me about, and it kind of makes sense too. When voting used to be accessible only to landowners. And the reason this came up was because I asked, because I'm registered to vote in both California and Texas. I don't vote in both. But I'm registered to vote in both. Because once you register, well, I guess it varies from state to state, but once you register, there's not really an unregistration process. Or maybe there is, but like who bothers to look that up, right? So I'm registered to vote in 2 states. And then I started asking questions, because that's what I do. I ask questions. What if I own a business in both states? If I own a business in California and a business in Texas, and there's a new governor election in both Texas and California. Well, shouldn't I get to vote? Because I might not live in both states, or maybe I spend 6 months in one state and 6 months in the other state, and I flip-flop back and forth. That actually fulfills the residency requirements for both states. Should I be able to vote in both states? Now, some people will say, oh, no, that's a terrible idea. Is it really? Now, of course, if I voted for the president twice, that would be wrong, because that's participating in the same election twice. But does it really matter if I vote for 2 different governors in 2 different states? Not really. But this is what brought up the point of land ownership. And somebody told me, well, this is why they used to have it where if you own land, you get to vote. If you own land, you get to vote. Now, if you think about like any other voting process, right? And I'll come back around to this in a minute, because there's a million different aspects to this, and you kind of have to consider all of them. But let's say you own shares in a corporation. For every share that you own, you get 1 vote. That's That's in the corporate bylaws. When the corporation was created and before a single one of those shares was sold, these were the rules governing the corporation and who gets to vote. And anybody who bought those shares was basically buying a chance to vote as per the bylaws. If you have more than one share, you have more than one vote. Now, this makes total sense, right? Because, if I own half the company, I get half the vote. And if somebody else owns 10%, well, they get 10% of the vote. It makes total sense, right? But when we look at the government, it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people, which means it's kind of owned by the people in a way, but it's not owned in like the way of traditional property rights, right? It's not like every single one of us holds a share. And I've actually heard, I think Joe McHugh had a similar scheme to this, where he was talking about like his freedom dividend, where he talks about everyone would become an owner, but what happens if somebody's born today? How do they get their share? Like, where do they sign up? How do you become that, right? And there's this process, and this becomes the tragedy of the commons, right? Because the government is a big common property. Now, there's another way to look at this, right? Because on one hand, it's like, well, who owns it? And everybody should have a right to vote, because, even if you don't buy a share of the United States government, like we should just have one, because it's like it affects all of us, right? But then there's the question of, why does it affect all of us? Why does the federal government affect all of us? And why does the state government affect all of us? Because what does the government really do? Now, you could think about it, and you could do some sort of system where you could say, okay, well, let's say we break the government into 1,000 different pieces, and every agency was its own thing, right? So if you have a driver's license, you pay a membership to the DMV, and therefore you get voting rights in the DMV. You could do something like that. But what about the police? Does that mean only the people who own the police, who pay the police, would get a voting right? And then what about the people who aren't paying the police? Do they not have any access to those police? And so now the people who are paying the police can say, oh, well, we want you to enforce the drug laws. And so now the police are running around enforcing the drug laws for the people who own the police, for the people who voted on the police, on the people who don't own the police, who maybe don't have the money for it, or not to buy as big a share as the other people. They're having the drug war enforced on them. Now, in this type of system, it absolutely makes no sense. But that's only because we have an unjust system that is not enforcing criminal law. It's enforcing arbitrary law. It's violating rights. It's violating people's rights in its everyday operations. So now if you consider that the government should not have the authority or the power, it does not have the authority or the power to violate anybody's rights, even though it does regularly. But if it doesn't have that, and it didn't do that, then what is it? What kind of things would you be able to vote on? Think about that. Because, think about it. Let's say the government of, I want to pick a weird faraway place. New Zealand. New Zealand doesn't affect us at all. Not really. People from New Zealand come to the United States. There's probably a little bit of trade going on. But if New Zealand bans guns, they're not coming to the United States to take mine. What do I care? If they ban cannabis, they're not coming to the United States to arrest me, or Mexico to arrest me. What do I care? Right? So I don't vote in their elections, but what they do has nothing to do with me. Now imagine if the United States government had nothing to do with you. Would you really want to vote? Would you really want to vote in it? Now, I know this is a really weird concept because when we think about the government, whether it's the state government or the local government or the federal government, it has everything to do with us. It tells us what we can or can't do. Can we smoke cannabis? Can we own guns? Can we do this? Can we do that? Maximum speed limit, driver's license, everything. But that was never really the purpose or the design of the government. So if you get rid of all of that stuff, the government it's a tool that's there for public use. You want to buy a house from somebody and you want a public record of it, you go to the government, you give them some money, and they register your property. Now, let's say the government registry that keeps track of property, because this is a voluntary service that people are happy to use, happy to pay for. And we elect that person, the clerk, right? The county clerk. Imagine if the only people who got to vote for the county clerk were the people who went and used the county registry. That makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you don't have anything registered in the county, what do you care? Who's elected? What do you care what their laws are? Unless, of course, they're going to pass a law that says, oh, well, you don't own any property now, but when you decide to own property, then we're going to, blah, 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 make it inaccessible to you somehow. Okay, fine. I could see that. But at the same time, if they didn't have a monopoly on it, and if they weren't enforcing that monopoly by preventing other people to start a business that did a similar thing, you wouldn't have that. And in fact, that's arguably a form of voting that would take care of itself. Instead of voting for the clerk who's going to run the registry, you vote for the registry itself. And so you have the government registry, and then you have, Elon Musk's registry. And when the government registry is like, they sound like they're doing some shady shit in there, I'm going to go use Elon's instead. They're going to lose all their business. So they have incentive now also to make sure they're not screwing anybody over. That's your vote, right? Your vote is, instead of picking who's in charge, it's saying, hey, I'm taking my business elsewhere. You don't have to move. You don't have to do anything, right? I'm just taking my business elsewhere. Now think about this with the DMV, who controls your driver's license. Well, the government was never really supposed to impose driver's licenses. In fact, it's illegal for individuals. It's only legal for businesses because of, international commerce and blah, 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 that kind of shit, which I still don't agree with, but it's there. When you decide to engage in business with the state, well, shouldn't you be able to say, okay, well, I'm one of these people. I'm one of these licensed people. Shouldn't I get to vote what the rules are? I mean, think about it. If you don't have a driver's license and you're not supposed to be driving, should you have a right to vote on what the speed limits are? So this is, I want to go back to the point of, okay, so who gets to vote for the government, right? Who gets to vote for these representatives? Well, these representatives they're supposed to represent you in writing these laws, but at the end of the day, they're writing a bunch of laws that they're not supposed to be writing. And actually, this is a really interesting argument because you have a lot of people who are saying, well, I don't vote because the things that the representatives are doing, they're not supposed to be doing. So how do you stop them from doing that? They're focused more on stopping them from doing the things that are criminal rather than voting on who's going to replace them, because they understand, just because you vote for somebody to replace this person, that means this other person's going to come in and they're going to do all sorts of criminal things. So they're not even worried about voting. They see a bigger problem, which is that the government is doing, and I guess that's kind of like what I'm saying. that the government is running around violating your rights, who gets to vote really doesn't matter, because they're not going to give you an option to vote for them to go away, for them to stop stealing your rights, for them to stop stealing your paychecks, for them to stop stealing your property. They're never going to give you that vote. Why would they? They're already able to get away with so much. Why would they give you an option to put your foot down? So these people who are out there saying, I don't want to vote, well, to them, it really doesn't matter who gets to vote or if they're checking for IDs, right? And while I don't completely agree with these people on the actions that I decide to take, I get what they're saying. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, you want to smoke weed? Can I vote to take that away from you? Does it make sense to even put that on a ballot? No. And when it comes to our options, we get to vote between two different criminals to represent us. Does it really matter which one wins? Now, there's a lot of other stuff that comes up with this too, right? Because this whole thing came about because people were like, oh yeah, voter IDs. Oh, black people can't afford IDs, or black people don't know how to get IDs. That's why they're saying it's racist. I just watched this one video right now where they interviewed a bunch of black people. Did you know that white people think that you don't have IDs? Do you know anybody who doesn't have an ID? I think I'm the only person I know, and I know plenty of poor people, plenty of black people. They all have their IDs. They all have their papers, as much as I disagree with it, because I don't have one. All I have is a passport. I don't have a driver's license. I don't have a state ID. And if they imposed an ID law, then I'd probably show my passport. And if they said you can't vote because you don't have a state ID, I'd probably say, well, I'm not going to vote anyways. Go fuck yourself. I think that kind of shows the illusion, right? The illusion that so many people have that voting is so important, because if we don't get this guy, we're going to get the other guy, and it's going to be terrible. And the reality is, this train is already off the tracks. It doesn't matter who you stick on it. It's already off the tracks. It's already bulldozing our rights and freedoms. And we have to look at what's going to make a bigger change than just voting. It's I don't want to say voting is useless, but it's not as powerful as a lot of people think it is. Not voting at the ballot box. Voting with your dollars absolutely is. Voting with your feet absolutely is. Stop letting them steal your money. Start resisting. And I think this is an important one, because people think, well, just not paying taxes is good enough. No, you have to stop using their currency, because they'll steal through inflation. Inflation is also theft. This is the modern money theory, which they're really starting to push now, and they're really implementing. That's why they're printing so much money right now. These are the people who are behind this are these, they believe in modern monetary theory, which is, oh, we just print more money. And it works. I mean, you can't say it doesn't, right? You print more money, government has more money. But it steals from everybody else. And the people who support it don't have a lot of savings, so they don't really care. Until they see the prices go up. But the prices don't go up immediately. And then when the prices do go up, they blame the shop owners and they don't blame the government. Because, of course, their wages aren't going up with it, so then they also blame their employers. It's absolutely insane. But, so this is why I say, and this is why they're so afraid of cryptocurrency and gold and silver. Like, I don't think people realize how much the government hates gold and silver. Not so much the government, but the Federal Reserve. There was a guy who created this thing called the Liberty Dollar. And he made silver dollars out of silver. And they said he was counterfeiting money because it said the word dollar on it. Which is stupid because dollar is not owned by the United States. Canada makes silver dollars. Canada has a dollar. Mexico has a peso, and so do so many other countries. But Canada has a dollar. Belize has a dollar. I think they have a dollar. A lot of other countries have dollars. Call it a dollar. But the government hated this dollar because it was silver. Gold and silver. They've been trying to crack down as much as they possibly can. They charge taxes on it. If you buy gold online, you're supposed to pay sales tax on it with certain exceptions. And if you fall under one of those exceptions, I think most of the dealers just like automatically assume everyone's under the exception. But they tried. They tried to put a tax on it. Maybe there is a tax. I usually order it from out of state and they ship it, so I don't know. They don't want you using gold and silver as money. Because if everybody used gold and silver, the Federal Reserve notes would be worthless. Then they'd be printing worthless money, right? Like I could print a shit ton of monopoly money and I wouldn't go to jail for counterfeiting, but it's not like I can spend that anywhere. And so the government has the same problem, right? They're printing monopoly money. The only good thing is for them is that everyone accepts monopoly money right now. But you can take that power away from them by not using dollars, by using gold and silver or crypto. This is why they hate that stuff so much. This is why they're out propagandizing it, saying it's a scam, it's a scam. Okay, fine, it's a scam. So let people use it. What's so wrong? If everybody is so adamantly, there's news, it's Bitcoin. I know it's a scam, but I want to do it anyway. Why don't you just let them? Why are you trying to protect them from themselves? Really, think about that. I mean, that's the whole philosophy of gambling too, right? Like, I know it's gambling. I know it's rigged. I know the house always wins, but I want to gamble. Of course, you can do that in the stock market. You can do that by buying state-issued lottery tickets. But you can't do it outside of the government control, right? They have to control it. They have to be the profiteers. Why are lotteries only legal for the government to do? I could run a lottery to raise money for my campaign. Sell tickets, do a drawing, here's some money. But it's illegal. A felony. Terrible, terrible crime. I could do the exact same thing that they do. And I'd be looking at probably 30 to 50 years in prison. But they're allowed to do it. And then they say, it's for the schools, it's for the children. Yeah, like any of that money ever really gets there. Some of it, 5%, 10%. The rest of it goes to all their fucking, all the money they embezzle. But so, back to my point, take their power away. And I know it's not that easy, right? You can't just go into your grocery store. You can't walk into an H-E-B or a Ralph's and say, I want to pay in Bitcoin, right? Now, there are ways. They're starting to come up with these credit cards that give you access to your crypto and stuff like that. A lot of people at least have their savings in crypto. So most of the cash that they have is not US dollars, Federal Reserve notes, which does help. Which does help to take their power away. It does help to devalue the dollar itself. We're still a long way away. But all the regulations that they put in place, all these know your customer laws that make it difficult for a lot of people to get into exchanges. And once you're in, the government's now tracking everything that you do. This is a problem. I have exchanges that I can't get verified for because of know your customer laws. And it's not like I'm a criminal. I mean, it depends who you ask, but according to the government, there's no criminal history. One won't verify me because I don't have a state issue ID and they won't accept the passport. There are international ones, same reason. Or they want me to fill out tax information, which I'm not going to do. For a foreign company, a company that's not even in the United States wants me to fill out United States tax forms. Screw that. Which, by the way, you're not supposed to be paying taxes on your Bitcoin. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. I know the United States, the IRS disagrees with that. They say, oh, it's like property. If you buy and sell it. Yeah, but it's not taxable. The tax code does not cover it unless you admit, I don't want to say this because I don't know exactly how that works. Like I know, for example, your wages are not wages because you can look at the definition and it says they're not wages. When it comes to capital gains, that's a little bit different because it's a slightly different tax. But I know you don't have to pay it on buying and selling property because the United States Supreme Court, I'm going to go over this again for anyone who hasn't heard this before. Your property is your property. You have an unalienable right to contract your property and exchange it for other property. Money is property, which means you have an unalienable right to exchange property like Bitcoin for money like Federal Reserve notes, tax-free because it's a right. It cannot be taxed. It cannot be regulated. It cannot be taken away. So whatever the IRS has to say about it is probably under the assumption that you're an employee, which is somebody who works for the government, or, any of these other number of rules that they misrepresent when they say your money is taxable. Take their power away. Forget about voting. I mean, vote if you have the opportunity. Don't vote for Democrats and Republicans. And I'm not going to tell you to vote for libertarians. Vote for people who you think are really going to go in there and wreck the fucking system. Because this system, and I hate to be all doomsday, apocalyptic, Alex Jones. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the lizard people come out and turn the frogs gay. I don't want to go down that road, but this is what they're doing. They're violating our rights. They're stealing our money. They're stealing our property. And it has to stop. And that doesn't come from voting. And most of these politicians who are in there, and I've talked to so many people who they go to college, they go to poli-sci classes, and they're like, oh yeah, I understand American politics. And it's like, no, you don't. You know the shit that they've been telling you since you grew up. You might know how to operate a campaign, how to get in there, but you don't have any clue. You don't even know what your rights are. You might know how to get in and win an election. That doesn't mean you should. That doesn't mean anyone should put you at the helm of the ship. That's actually a great analogy. Imagine. You pick your favorite airline. You go to your favorite airline and you say, hey, I was just wondering, what's your hiring process for pilots? And they say, oh, well, we have a process where the pilots come, we interview them all, and whoever gives the best interview, we hire them as a pilot. Okay, what does this interview consist of? And let's say, well, the interview consists of, did they put on the suit properly? Are they wearing the suit? Does it look perfect? Does it look clean? Is everything lined up? Is it the right size? Did they wash it? Is it, I don't know. Is the belt line straight? Is the buckle straight in line with the buttons? Is he wearing the pin on the right lapel? Imagine if that was their interview process. Does he speak good English? Is he bilingual for international flights? Can he operate the microphone? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at 30,000 feet, and our stewardesses will be coming by with your complimentary drinks. Oh yeah, this is all this. But you never ask him if he can fly a plane, because that's not important. Would you trust that airline with your life? Because that's how we're electing politicians. They don't know how to run these programs. I mean, political science. Just think about that. Political science. The science of politics. Politics is not government operations. Politics is, I'll make you a sweet deal over here if you make me a sweet deal over here. Politics is telling the right lie to the right voters to make sure they vote for you. This is political science. What do they teach you in political science? They teach you about campaigns and polls and probably some game theory. They don't tell you how to balance a budget. I mean, they might browse over that, but in the history of American governments, there has never been, I don't want to say never. I mean, I'm going to say it anyways, but there has never been a balanced budget. Not at the federal level, not at the state level, not at the city level. That's why I didn't want to say never, because there's probably been a couple cities that pulled it off. I don't know. The feds pulled it off once. Clinton pulled it off by raising taxes. He didn't cut anything. He just raised a bunch of taxes. I mean, if you raise enough taxes, yeah, you'll balance the budget. That's inevitable. But that doesn't count because you're just stealing. Political science is bullshit. Do not vote for anybody who studied political science. Vote for the people who know what your rights are and are going to be the wrench in the gears that stop the government and all these corrupt poli-sci majors from robbing you blind and violating your rights. That's who you want to vote for. But of course, if we all just woke up and realized that all the government does is steal from us and violate our rights, and then maybe returns like 1% in the form of things that are actually good for us, and we just stop playing that game and stop giving them money and stop giving them power, which we don't need to vote to do, things are actually going to turn out all right. Real change, a revolution does not come from voting the right person into office. A revolution comes when the people understand and change their mindset. When they understand what the government is, they change their mindset about what they want from government and what they expect government to do, and what they're willing to allow government to do when it comes to all the bad things that they do. That's revolution. It doesn't require violence. You don't have to burn down the government buildings. You don't have to shoot police. In fact, it's better if you don't. There's one theory that I read that was, how to start a revolution. And it was absolutely be nonviolent. And at some point, the state, the government, will become violent against you because they want to resist your revolution. your revolution of minds. And so the government will become violent against you. And when they do that, people think, oh, we have to defend ourselves against that. We have to have the boogaloo. We have to fire back. Nope. It's counterintuitive, but you're not supposed to do that. Because when they fire first, and when they continue to fire, even though nobody is firing back in their direction, more people, a massive amount of people, wake up to the reality that the government is corrupt. It's firing on nonviolent people who are not firing back. If one person fires back at the government, oh, now it's justified. Bring out the SWAT teams, bulldoze everybody, shoot them all down. And every American will be there like, oh, those poor police officers. Oh, my God. These protesters, they shot at them and they defended their lives. I'm so glad none of the police officers died and that only 500,000 protesters died. That's what people are going to be saying. We see this all the time. But if the police shoot and kill 5 protesters and the protesters do absolutely nothing back, they don't throw so much as a bottle back at them. They don't burn any police cars. Slash the tires, maybe. Because, let's be honest. What do people see? The pictures. They see a picture of a burned police car. Oh my God, why are these people doing this to our government? You show a picture of a car with slashed tires, and it's like, what? I don't see it. Those aren't slashed. What do you mean? What are you talking about? That's not legal advice. I'm not recommending you do that. I'm just saying. And this is why they have agent provocateurs. This is absolutely why. Remember, we saw the police in the George Floyd, Minneapolis, the first riots. There was that cop. He was wearing a pink shirt and he had his face covered, and he started throwing bricks in this one building, and then people chased him off. That was a cop. That was what you call an agent provocateur. Because they understand this, right? The government isn't stupid. They've spent billions of dollars and decades researching all the, how do revolutions work? This is the CIA and all their tactics. And local police departments have it now. And of course, you have consultants from the CIA going, oh, this is what we got to do at a national level. Oh, this city is ripe. This city's ripe for one of these violent protests. Let's go down there and start one. CIA is involved in this. They're not supposed to operate in the United States, but they do. I'm sure. Even if it's just giving the information to the police and letting the police do it. That way they're not operating. They're just agents, interagency communication. But so they understand, well, we don't want to look like the bad guys. We don't want to fire first. So instead, what we'll do is we'll send out our agent provocateurs, and it's very easy for them, right? Because if you want to look like a cop and make the cops look violent, what do? You got to put on a uniform, and the cops generally all know each other and be like, I've never seen you before. That uniform's not very convincing. Something's off. That's not the right color t-shirt we wear. And all of a sudden you're getting taken down. But for them to dress up like us, it's like t-shirt, jeans, whatever. And, oh, he must not be a cop. It's so much easier for them, right? And so what do? They appear to be with us, and then they throw a brick at a building, or they throw a Molotov cocktail at a police officer, and then they leave and let the rest of the crowd deal with the police that are now shooting into the crowd, and the police are justified because they're doing it defensively. So this is why they recommend, and this is, where's this book? I have it on my shelf over here somewhere. How to have a revolution, something like that. This is why they say, if you're in a crowd and somebody is acting violently towards the police, or they're starting to burn down buildings, or they're starting to do this and that, stop them. Detain them. Capture them. Arrest them. Bring handcuffs to these things. And don't try to handcuff the police. But if someone starts to get violent, handcuff them. Tell everybody. Let everybody know. Hey, guys, we're here to be peaceful. If the government shows their true colors and they get violent, we're not going to do anything back. And you explain to them why. And if somebody gets violent, there's a very good chance they're working for the government. So handcuff them. Stop them. And let the news cover that. Even if it's not, the mainstream media, because they probably won't. Get the independent media. Get pictures of the person. Get pictures of their face. Post them up everywhere. Get video of the arrest. This guy just threw a Molotov cocktail at the police, trying to get us to look like the bad guys, trying to get us, the revolution, to look like criminals. Oh, it turns out he's actually a police officer. Or maybe once his face is public, maybe he'll admit, oh, no, I made a deal with the police. I was arrested for grand theft auto, and they said they'd let me go if I went into the crowd and threw a Molotov cocktail at the police. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's ever happened, but that's a possibility. Maybe I've been watching too much Gotham. That's something that would happen on that show. But I mean, this is stuff we need to, and this is like a lot of people talk about self-governance. That's kind of what this is, right? This is your crowd. This is your revolution. Govern your own crowd, govern your own revolution. Make sure you don't have any imposters. The same way the police would do that. Oh, this guy, he's wearing a fake police uniform. He's not really a cop. He's not really one of us. Let's arrest him. We got to do the same thing. And then on top of that, it makes us look like the good guys because, wait. You're trying to say that these protesters were being violent, but they actually are, the protesters arrested the violent protester. So how can the protesters be violent if they even arrested one of their own protesters because they were getting violent? They're able to police themselves. Meanwhile, the police are out there trying to kill all of them. Now, I guess this gets really important because we've seen huge crowds of people who get out and block the road and attack cars, random cars. They're not even attacking the government. They're just attacking people or businesses. That's bad. That's bad for us because that's not revolution. That's just criminal activity. And a lot of people suspect that that's all paid for by, the Koch brothers or the who are those other guys? I don't know. All these corrupt, giant, multi-billion-dollar organizations. We've seen the bricks that were laid out for protesters to throw into buildings, right? Pallets of bricks just laying there in the middle of the city with no construction going on. Kind of sus. Right? So what makes somebody get out and just jump in the middle of the highway and say, yeah, we're gonna jump in front of cars and get run over? Somebody leads that. Why do they all show up at one place? Somebody came up with that idea. Who came up with that idea? Do we know? I don't know. Is it possible this could just organically happen? Maybe. Less likely if somebody has a plan, because now they have something to do. Maybe if you have a bunch of people come out and they're all in one space and they don't know what to do, and one guy says, hey, let's jump in front of traffic and stop the traffic, then yeah, maybe everyone will do that. Maybe that guy works for one of these organizations that's trying to make the protesters look bad so that we can say, oh, we need more government. We need government to come in and save us. We need secret police to come in and abduct people and take them to black sites where nobody knows what happened to them. Gets people wanting that stuff. Not the people who are out in the streets, of course. The people who are watching from their TVs at home, who have no idea what is really going on. So, if most of the people, remember this, right? Most people are not going to the protests. They're watching the protests from their TVs or from the Twitter. Most people are seeing whatever happens through the lens of the media. So conduct yourselves so that no matter what they film, no matter what angle it is, it cannot be construed any other way than the government is the bad guy. That means no angry, violent protests. As happy as it might make us to see a police car on fire, that is not good for the revolution. All right, guys. This just turned into a long rant about all kinds of crazy stuff. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you like what I had to say. If you did, or even if you didn't, make sure to like and share. Start a watch party. No, I'm supposed to say that at the beginning of the show. Share it, like, subscribe, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, taxation, youtube.com/taxationistheft. Go subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Look for Taxation is Theft, the podcast, and subscribe. And tell all your friends, you don't have to pay taxes. You can legally not pay taxes. Just go listen to the show. Go subscribe. This guy, he's crazy, but he doesn't pay taxes. And he gets away with it. And he doesn't have a driver's license. And he gets away with it. All right, guys. Have a good night. Taxation is Theft. Oh, I just switched to the chat tab. And there's like all kinds of messages and stuff I didn't see. And maybe I'll cover some of these points last time. Tyler says, fuck you, debate me. Oh, but he didn't click the link. This was a free-for-all. There was a link. Tyler, you didn't press it. All right, guys, I will catch you next time. Taxation is Theft.